All right, listener, get this. We're going to deep dive into a real cold case, one that's as mysterious as it is tragic.
Yeah, we're talking about Flying Tiger Line Flight 739.
Back in '62, it's been over 60 years, and people are still looking for answers.
A Lockheed L-1049 super constellation just vanished over the Pacific.
A huge plane, gone, poof, just like that.
107 people on board, no wreckage, no mayday.
Nothing. And to make things even more strange, this was the beginning of the Vietnam War.
It was carrying 93 Army Rangers. They were headed to Saigon.
Now, these were specialists trained in electronics and communications.
Not your everyday deployment.
So that begs the question, why were these highly skilled soldiers on a civilian flight in a war zone?
To make it even more weird, there were 3 South Vietnamese soldiers on board.
And their identities, still a mystery.
Definitely makes you wonder about what they were really doing.
Officially, they were going to Saigon to relieve other soldiers who were training South Vietnamese troops.
But you've got to think, all this secrecy around the passenger list.
The specialist on board, the timing, early Vietnam War, escalating tensions.
Covert operations. It all points to something more hush-hush going on.
So not just a regular troop transport. You're thinking covert ops, hidden agendas, the whole shebang.
Exactly, got to consider the politics of the time.
The U.S. was deep in Vietnam, but they were also trying to downplay their role to the public.
Using civilian charter flights like this one?
They let them kind of deny things if they needed to.
It's possible Flight 739, part of a secret mission.
Could have been gathering intel or helping with other undercover stuff happening over there.
Yeah, in the region.
Okay, so let's back up for a sec and trace the flight path.
Get a better picture. So, Flight 739 left Travis Air Force Base in California, headed for Saigon.
They had stops planned for refueling in Honolulu, Wake Island.
Guam, Clark Air Base in the Philippines.
Got it.
After a couple of minor delays, the plane left Guam.
80 minutes later, they send a routine radio message with their location and then
Sign.
poof! Just like that. How can a plane that big with over 100 people just disappear?
I mean, the Pacific is huge, but you'd think there would be something, some trace.
Debris, anything. This is where it gets even more mysterious.
A Liberian tanker, the SSTL Linzen, was in the area.
They saw something really strange.
They said they saw this bright flash of light in the sky, so bright it lit up their whole deck.
Hold on, a flash of light.
Then they saw 2 red lights falling towards the ocean.
Whoa, wait, hold on. A flash of light and 2 falling lights? Could that have been an explosion?
They definitely thought it was an explosion.
Did anyone investigate?
The tanker crew tried to figure out where they thought the objects landed.
They even changed course to search the area.
But they didn't find anything. Plus, this was in 1962.
Sonar and search and rescue technology were nothing like they are now.
Nowhere near as advanced.
So we have this eyewitness account, but no physical evidence. It's like a puzzle missing a crucial piece.
Yeah, you said it.
The SSTL Linzen report is the most important clue we have.
But without any wreckage, we just can't know for sure.
All right, let's get into the theories then. Given the flash of light, could it have been sabotage? Like a bomb?
It's definitely a top contender. The Super Constellation was a reliable plane used for civilian and military transport.
But I take it wasn't indestructible.
It had one weakness. Those 4 big propeller engines, they needed a lot of fuel.
Okay, I see where you're going. Lots of fuel.
During the stop in Guam, the plane was left alone for a while it was being refueled.
So if someone wanted to mess with it, that was their chance?
Exactly.
Flying Tiger Line thought something was up too. Didn't they say the plane couldn't have blown up under normal circumstances?
Yeah, they were very suspicious. Their executive vice president even said it was really uncommon for a super constellation to explode midair.
Without something causing it from the outside.
Right.
Okay, sabotage is a possibility, but who would want to bring down Flight 739?
And how would they have done it? Those are the big questions. We have to think about the historical context.
The early 60s were a tense time. Cold War in full swing.
The U.S. was getting more and more involved in Vietnam. Lots of groups could have wanted to target a flight like that.
So enemies of the U.S., people against the war, maybe even some groups in the South Vietnamese government.
Exactly, and we can't rule out someone on the inside.
This was a covert mission. Secrets always create their own enemies.
Yeah, always.
This is like a spy movie. Plane full of secrets disappears in a flash of light over the Pacific.
And a ton of potential suspects with motives hidden in the Cold War.
We got to look into these possibilities more. But hold on a sec. What about other potential causes, even if they seem less likely?
Good point.
What about mechanical failure? Could something have gone wrong with the plane itself?
It's possible, though less likely with a tough plane like the Super Constellation.
They were known to be pretty reliable.
Right, but any aircraft can have a sudden malfunction, a catastrophic one.
The reports mentioned that the plane had some small engine issues earlier in the flight.
Yeah, but those were supposedly fixed.
So something major happening suddenly, maybe with the fuel system or even the structure of the plane.
Couldn't rule it out completely.
Okay, so mechanical failure is a possibility, but sabotage seems more likely, given what the tanker crew saw. What about friendly fire? Could the plane have been accidentally shot down by U.S. forces?
That's a tough one. It's not impossible, especially with all the secrecy around the mission.
If Flight 739 was under the radar, it could have been mistaken as an enemy,
And if that happened, it would explain why the government was so quiet about it.
and why they didn't want to share any information.
Yeah, a cover-up of a terrible mistake.
It's a theory that we can't ignore, but to prove it, we'd need access to classified information.
About military operations happening then, not likely.
Okay, so 3 main theories: sabotage, mechanical failure, and friendly fire. Each one has its own possibilities and problems.
It's a real head-scratcher.
That's for sure, and we're just scratching the surface here.
The mystery of Flight 739 runs deep.
And we haven't even talked about the human side of it all.
Mm-hmm.
107 families wondering what happened to their loved ones.
Yeah, we need to hear their stories.
Their struggles and how they've dealt with this loss, the human impact of this mystery is huge.
We'll dig into that more next time.
We'll continue to try and solve this mystery and look at how this tragedy has affected people's lives.
The impact it's had on history.
Okay, so last time we were talking about that Liberian tanker, the SS Linson, and their account of what they saw.
Right, their report could really be the key to figuring this out.
That's a big deal. They said they saw this insanely bright flash of light. So bright, it lit up their entire deck.
It wasn't just something small they saw, it was 1:30 in the morning, so they must have had a clear view of the sky.
They did, so what else did they see?
Well, the night watchman, he saw a vapor trail high in the sky first.
A vapor trail?
Yeah, it was moving from east to west, then it went behind a cloud, then boom, this huge flash that lit up the whole night.
Okay, that sounds like some kind of explosion. But what about those 2 red lights? The ones that fell into the ocean, what were those?
They said it was 2 big things on fire, falling at different speeds.
If there was an explosion, that detail is really interesting.
Definitely.
So what are you thinking?
Well, a bunch of things could have caused an explosion, a bomb, a missile.
Or even if one of the engines failed really badly and the fuel exploded?
Right, but each of those would leave a different kind of trace.
So you're saying those lights, they could have been parts of the plane?
Yeah, maybe engines burning up after the explosion.
Or if it was a bomb, maybe burning parts of the plane itself?
Or even pieces of the bomb.
This is the detective in me coming out, but what kind of explosives back in 1962 would have been strong enough to make a flash that big?
One you could see from miles away, like the tanker crew did.
Exactly.
It all comes down to what kind of technology they had back then.
So what do they have?
They had military-grade explosives for sure, stuff like Composition B.
Composition B.
A powerful mix used in bombs, even some missiles.
Could something like that have been snuck onto the plane in Guam when it was being refueled?
It's possible security wasn't as strict back then.
As it is today?
Someone with access and the right connections could have planted a bomb.
Okay, let's talk about the investigation itself. You mentioned the CAB, but for those listening who don't know, what is the CAB?
CAB stands for the Civil Aeronautics Board. They investigated plane crashes back in the day.
Kind of like the NTSB we have today.
Yeah, the National Transportation Safety Board, they figure out what caused the crash.
And make suggestions to make flying safer.
Right.
So what did the CAB say about Flight 739? Did they have a theory?
Their report said the plane was destroyed during the flight, but they couldn't say for sure what caused it.
They knew about what the tanker crew saw,
And they considered sabotage as a possibility.
but no wreckage, no real proof.
Exactly, it all comes back to those missing pieces.
It's frustrating. But I get it. Let's go back to the sabotage idea. If we say that's the most likely thing, then we have to figure out the motives.
Who would benefit from Flight 739 going down?
That's where the whole Vietnam War context comes in, right?
Absolutely, we have to remember that.
A lot of people were really against the U.S. being involved in Vietnam, both in America and in other countries.
Yeah, a lot of opposition.
So groups like the Viet Cong or even people in South Vietnam itself who supported them.
They might have seen Flight 739 as a target, something they could attack.
Especially if they knew about the mission, the specialists on board.
And what kind of intel they might have been carrying.
You mentioned covert operations before. Can you explain that a bit?
For listeners who might not know how those work, what exactly was the U.S. doing in Vietnam that they wanted to keep secret?
Good question.
Think of it like playing chess in the dark.
Ooh, I like that.
Covert operations, it's all about secrecy, making it seem like you had nothing to do with something.
Plausible deniability.
Getting stuff done without leaving a trace.
Leaving fingerprints, I get it.
In Vietnam, that meant training and supporting local groups who were anti-communist.
It also meant things like reconnaissance missions, trying to make the North Vietnamese government unstable.
Yeah, lots of stuff going on.
And all of that was top secret. If those soldiers on Flight 739 were part of something like that.
It makes sense that the government wouldn't want to talk about it.
Even after the plane vanished?
Makes sense. All that secrecy makes this case even harder to figure out.
It's hard to investigate when the people who might know something can't say anything.
Yeah, it's like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing.
Okay, so we've got potential motives from groups who didn't want the U.S. in Vietnam. But what about someone on the inside?
Could someone in the U.S. government or the military have had a reason to take down Flight 739?
I mean, that's what all the conspiracy theories say.
It does sound like something out of a spy novel, but we can't rule it out.
Okay, I'm listening. What are the possibilities?
What if the mission itself was compromised?
What do you mean?
Like, what if someone involved in the mission decided to sabotage it?
To get something out of it, to protect a secret, or even to get rid of witnesses.
That's a dark thought.
It is, but it's possible. The world of espionage is full of double agents and betrayals.
You never know who to trust.
And when you add in the high stakes and political pressure of the Cold War, those motives become even stronger.
Yeah, that time was intense.
So we've got enemies outside, threats inside, a missing plane, and a government that's not talking.
It's a lot to take in.
It is, but let's not forget about mechanical failure. You said it's not as likely.
Right.
But still possible, right?
Even with the tanker crew's account, we can't completely rule out a major malfunction.
The Super Constellation was known to be reliable, but it was still a complicated machine.
A lot could go wrong.
And remember, they had those small engine issues earlier in the flight.
Yeah.
Maybe that was a sign that something bigger was wrong.
Maybe a fuel line, the hydraulics, or some weak spot that finally broke.
We've talked a lot about what might have happened, but what about what came after? This wasn't just a plane that disappeared. There were real people on board.
People with families and lives and dreams.
What happened to them?
That's the saddest part of all of this. 107 people lost.
Their fates tied to the mystery of Flight 739.
And for their families, not knowing is the hardest part.
It really is. It's time to talk about how this tragedy affected the families who were left behind.
Their struggles and their fight for the truth.
We'll get into that in the next part of our deep dive. Okay, so we're back. Last time we were getting into the human side of this whole thing.
The impact this has had on the families.
We've looked at the evidence, the theories.
Yeah, even some possible suspects.
But now it's time to really talk about the people affected by this tragedy.
How they've coped with losing their loved ones.
For over 60 years, the families of those 107 people have been living with this huge question mark.
They don't know what happened. It's got to be agonizing.
Imagine getting that call that your loved one is missing.
The empty seat at the table, birthdays, holidays, all those moments.
It's hard enough to deal with the grief, but then add on top of that being kept in the dark.
Being told that the truth is a secret you're not allowed to know.
That's a tough situation.
It really shows the struggle between government secrecy and the public's right to know.
On one hand, you've got national security, classified information, sensitive operations that need to be protected.
But then on the other hand, you have families who deserve closure, who need to understand what happened.
They need to be able to grieve properly.
To mourn their loved ones with dignity and respect.
It's a hard balance to find, and a lot of people feel like in the case of Flight 739, secrecy won out.
Yeah, these families were left in the dark, their grief made even worse by feeling betrayed by the very government their loved ones served.
And that feeling of betrayal just made them more determined to find the truth. They organized, researched, lobbied.
Extended answers.
They refused to let their loved ones be forgotten, to let the mystery of Flight 739 just disappear.
It's really amazing to see how these families, even with such immense loss and frustration, found strength in each other.
It is. They created support groups, shared information, became each other's support system.
They got each other through it.
They understood each other's pain like no one else could.
And all their hard work paid off, in some ways at least.
They were a huge reason why a memorial was built in Columbia Falls, Maine.
Dedicated to those lost on Flight 739.
It's a place where families can come together, tell stories, and find comfort with each other.
It's a powerful reminder of what happened, a testament to how dedicated they are.
But it also shows that Even with a memorial, even after all this time, they still need answers.
They still need to know.
We've talked about all the possible explanations: sabotage, mechanical failure, friendly fire.
But for the families, it really comes down to one question. What happened to our loved ones?
And that question might never have a definite answer.
The lack of wreckage, the different stories, the government not talking, it all creates this cloud of uncertainty that may never go away.
It's a reminder that some mysteries stick around, that some wounds never fully heal.
But it also shows how resilient people can be, how they find meaning and purpose even in the face of tragedy.
The story of Flight 739 isn't just about a missing plane.
It's about love that lasts, about how important truth and accountability are.
It's about the strength of the human spirit.
And it makes us think critically, question what we think we know, and never stop looking for answers no matter how hard it gets.
That's right. Well, listener, as we wrap up this deep dive, we'll leave you with this. The mystery of Flight 739 might stay unsolved,
But the stories of those lost and the courage of their families, they'll stay with us.
reminding us how precious life is
How important truth is.
and how strong the human spirit can be.